presented by Caltech.
I'd like to welcome you to the Ignite Your Teaching portion of TeachWeek. I was especially happy when Cassandra asked me if I would do the opening remarks for this event because I just loved it last year, and I'm sure this year will be just as exciting as last year. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Cindy Weinstein. I'm Vice Provost and Chief Diversity Officer, but my main role is I'm an American Literature professor. My area of expertise is 19th century American literature. That will become obvious when I read my remarks. I want to thank Cassandra and Jen Weaver and Mitch Aiken and Leslie Rico and Clarice Weissenon for organizing this event and TeachWeek more broadly. It's already been wonderful, and I hope that if you haven't been to the third floor of the CTLO to see the photography exhibit about teaching and learning at Caltech from the beginning to now, I encourage you to do so. It's really, really quite beautiful. Okay, now for my prepared remarks. When speakers finish, you should feel free to thank them with your applause. I'm not asking for your applause from me, but just in between, if you would like to, you should definitely do that. In April 1960, there was a Reader's Digest article, and in it, Robert Frost famously said, quote, "Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or your self-confidence." I suspect that most of us in this room have spent years acquiring this ability to listen, though I would also suspect that we've lost our temper or self-confidence along the way. As educators, we have knowledge that we want to share with our students, and we also have the passion that has led to that pursuit of knowledge. I suspect that most of us in this room are here because of a teacher who ignited in us a love for a discipline. Yesterday, Shirley Malcolm told us about Mrs. Smoot's elementary grade school class, and Mrs. Smoot's made Shirley believe that despite segregation and profound experiences of disempowerment, Shirley was capable, knowledgeable, and had the potential to do great things. For me, it was Mr. Lux in high school who talked about the wonder and complexity of Moby Dick and dared someone in the class to read it, telling us that he would help that brave person get through it, and he would help them, i.e. her, along the way. Transmitting both the knowledge and the passion is wonderful. It's what memorable teachers do. It's what we must do. And although Frost made his rather tart statement about education almost 60 years ago, the main activity in many classrooms remains listening, which of course is a rather passive mode of engagement. But happily, this is changing. Although listening is still key and the foundation for understanding, we now know that it isn't the only thing that must happen in the classroom in order for students to learn. Lecturing, of course, is all about listening, but it's about listening to one voice. We know that the lecture as soliloquy not only doesn't work for everyone, but doesn't work as well as other types of teaching. The data show that sharing ideas, collaborating, and active learning make for a deeper engagement with the subject. In order for our students to maintain their temperature and their self-confidence, they must be recognized as actually having a voice, and their voices need to be heard in the classroom. It's much easier to learn when one feels like one belongs. The presentations we'll hear today in the lightning round celebrate the transformations taking place in Caltech's classrooms, where the primacy of listening is sharing the stage or the lectern with new ways of learning, including visualizing, collaborating, flipping classrooms, using technology to enhance one's pedagogy, redesigning the spaces in which learning happens, and going to different spaces in the community to learn more pedagogical techniques that will reach out to more communities. I want to conclude these opening remarks with another famous New Englander, Ralph Waldo Emerson, whose 1837 lecture on education, if one can get past the strenuous masculinity of it. He writes this, quote, "It is ominous that this word education has so cold, so hopeless a sound. A treatise on education, a convention for education, a lecture, a system, affects us with slight paralysis and a certain yawning of the jaws. It is with great pleasure and confidence that I can say that the lightning round presentations we'll hear today do no such thing. Teaching and learning and outreach at Caltech is a vibrant and fundamental part of the Caltech experience, thanks to the excellent work being done at the CTLO and a new understanding and commitment to the notion that excellence in research must be accompanied by excellence in teaching. And all of us who educate have listened to our students and to the data, which unequivocally tells us that the best education keeps our temperature normal and inspires our students' self-confidence. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Eric Black of the Caltech Physics Department. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Eric Black. I'm in the Physics Department. That's very loud. Okay. Most of my research experience is in LIGO, gravitational wave detection, but that's not what I'm here to talk about today. My full-time job now is teaching both the introductory and the senior experimental physics labs here at Caltech. And I want to talk about a few things that we have been changing in the way that they're taught to better prepare our students for what is going to immediately follow in their careers. Before I talk about the changes that we've made, I want to talk about the way things are traditionally done and the way things were traditionally done at Caltech and at most other schools. There's not a lot of variation in this approach from university to university. You'll see a lot of changes in the specific experiments done, but the overall approach is very consistent. And that approach is students will do some classic experiments, experiments that they've read about in their textbooks or they've heard about in their lecture classes, in their theory classes, and then they sit down and they actually do a version of that experiment in the lab and see the actual results. Those experiments can be, well, at Caltech we teach nuclear magnetic resonance, optical pumping. Almost every university has a Millikan oil drop experiment, which we should, given where we are, but we don't. Mossbauer effect, Stern-Gerlach, where the electron spin was discovered. These are fantastic experiments. The focus here is really on illuminating a theoretical concept that they've learned in another class. If you're lucky, you'll get some data analysis practice in it as well. But these are great experiments. They're wonderful for teaching physics and deeper concepts, but they do not prepare students for a career in research. And the reason is they use completely different tools. The canned experiments that students do in an advanced lab, even a senior level advanced lab at a place like Caltech, research uses completely different tools. It's not at all the same, same hardware that they'll use for the simple experiments, and most of our students we think are going to go on to do research. So what we're doing here is we're taking a little bit of a different tack. We're adding on some experiments that aren't really experiments. We're teaching the tools that they'll use in research. And we're doing this, an example here is lock-in detection. And what we do, we try to do this in a hardware-independent way in the sense that we teach what the tool does rather than how it works. And if you look, the picture here shows two lock-ins, one of which, the top one is a PAR 128A from the early 1970s. It's an analog lock-in. The bottom one is an SR 830, a Stanford Research Systems from the early 2000s. These things you use totally different internals to perform the same function. This one uses a Schmidt trigger to do everything analog. This one takes an A to D converter and then does everything in software. I don't have time to go through what they do, but this is what we teach the students. We teach the students what they do, and then the students can adapt to either one of these depending on which one they find themselves using in the lab. We have added some experiments at Caltech. We've added some in the freshman lab. We focus on digital data acquisition in the freshman lab and the fast Fourier transform. And we also teach them Mathematica, which we hope will become useful for them at the very next term in their coursework as opposed to their research. And then we have a series of more advanced things. And I have pictures here of, these are research experiments in the LIGO cryogenics lab here at Caltech. And the one thing I want to point out, she says wrap it up, so I am. We see here an anti-alias chassis. This is a custom piece of hardware that LIGO has built, but if the students understand the underlying principles that we've taught them, they'll be able to handle this, or this, or this, or any hardware that they haven't yet seen because they know what it's doing underneath. Bottom line, I don't have time to read all of this. The bottom line here is the less bewildering the tools are when they enter research, the more the students will be able to think about the science when they do get there, as opposed to trying to get oriented to what is this thing and what does it does and how do I work it. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Adviv. This is June. We're both undergrads in CS. We're seniors. We're going to talk about a project that we did last term about crowdsourcing a visualization of the CS curriculum at Caltech. So the motivation behind this was that oftentimes students just follow the set of classes they're supposed to take that's shown on their major requirements website, and oftentimes that doesn't capture the order of the classes they should be taking as recommended by upperclassmen, because sometimes different classes, though they're not specifically listed as prereqs for each other, often have concepts that are similar, and taking one class before another really helps you understand the material in a class down the line. So right now, the only way for underclassmen to get access to this information is to just talk to their upperclassmen and ask them about hey, what class did you take before you took this class? Was it helpful? What sort of stuff did you learn in this class? And did you need to know these languages before you took this class? And did knowing those languages help you, or was only the concepts relevant? So we sort of surveyed the undergrad population to try to build a visualization of the dependencies between the different classes in CS.
To create this visualization, we surveyed all the CS major undergrads at Caltech, and we got responses from 156 students, which was much higher than we actually expected. We created a visual, in the survey that we sent out, we had a list of about 10 core CS classes, and for each class we asked students what other classes helped them prepare for that class. And with that data, we created this visualization. And on this, if you hover over one specific class, then you can see what other classes helped many other students prepare for that one class. And through this visualization, we were able to gain some insight that we could not gain from the current existing prerequisites. So for example, CS2 is one of the core classes that CS majors take at Caltech, and the current prerequisite is just CS1. But the survey revealed that a lot of students thought that the CS11C track, which is a class that basically teaches you the basics of the C language, was extremely helpful, especially for freshmen to take this class. And in addition, another class, CS21, which is the freshman's introduction to theoretical computer science. This should actually just say prerequisites was CS1, but the survey insight revealed that taking Math 6A helped a lot of students in CS21. And we think that repeating this survey among other majors at Caltech could help a lot of underclassmen choose which classes to take during their 4 years here, and also help faculty maybe improve the curriculum and change the ordering of the current classes. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Great. Hi, my name is Arya Anjad-Babai. I'm a second-year graduate student in physics. I'm going to talk to you today about the title there and some of the work I've been doing in the last year or two with a group we call the Caltech Traveling Demo Circus. If you're interested in doing outreach, please reach out to me. We coordinate with the CTLO, and it's really therapeutic, actually. This was us at the Science for March event, and I'll talk a little bit. I'm not going to try to convince you to do more demonstrations, because you should already be doing demonstrations in your classrooms, I think. I'm going to talk about effective ways to really get a lot out of those demonstrations. So the most important thing to doing any sort of physics outreach or education and science, I think, is telling a good story. Good storytelling is good outreach. I like to think of physics as reaching out to all of these unknown scales, 10 to the minus 20 meters, 10 to the billions of light years, and coming back and getting some answer or some information from those scales that is relevant to human life. And the challenge and the fun part about outreach is how to tell a story that connects these scales to ordinary life. So here I have an example of 3 demos we do. These demos would normally be sort of in a physics class given in isolation in separate units. This one is talking about angular momentum with a bike wheel. We put the kids on a spinning platform, and as they rotated, conservation of angular momentum causes them to rotate. It blows their mind. This is a demo with magnets, visualizing magnetic fields and then using them with electromagnets to spin a motor. And this is a demo, one of my favorites, with a superconducting material. This is YBCO. We've cooled it to 70-ish Kelvin with liquid nitrogen, and we're levitating it above a magnet using a quantum phenomena known as flux pinning. These 3 topics seem unconnected, but actually we can put these together by talking about rotation. In here we talk about rotation in everyday life and how it's a little counterintuitive. Here we talk about what happens when things that are rotating are also charged. They create magnetic fields. And then here we talk about what happens with these charged objects when we look at their behavior in very different regimes, really cold regimes. And every step of the way, it's important to provide context in this story. Connect these magnets, for example, to MRIs, where they're used in the present day. Connect these electromotors to pretty much most of the electronics and circuitry around us. And connect the bike wheel. I mean, we can connect that to planets and the motion of hurricanes, to everything down to atoms. Just basically telling these kids that spin and rotation is everywhere in their lives. And so the important thing, and I've kind of touched upon this, is using the students' language and their experiences. So really you have to watch your jargon and be very intentional with your language. When I talk about rotation to most kids, I don't use the word angular momentum much. I say spinning things like to say spinning in the same direction. And then I'll mention angular momentum, but that term doesn't mean anything for them. You need to provide some context by seeing what do they already know, what in their lives is rotating, what are their experiences when they're in a car, what are their experiences when they're on a bike, and drawing connections between those and the really cool stuff that you're showing. A lot of times this stuff can turn into a magic show, which is fine because the world around us is really magical. That's why I do this. But the important thing is not just to show them the magic, but to show them how to find it, to show them where to find it, to give them the tools or the ability to look out in their world and see things a little differently, because that, at the end of the day, is what's going to help them out when they go into, say, a career in science. And most people aren't going to go into a career in science. So what do I want them to know? I don't really need them to know very specific things about balls rolling down hills and how to calculate something, as much as I want them to think about how big they are, how small they are, how fuzzy everything is, and how connected all these things are. So I'm going to finish up with just a slide of a bunch of really happy people and mind-blowing kids with their minds getting blown. And I think that's because the important part of this is to really encourage the play here. One of the things I didn't talk about as much with these demos is making sure the kids can get involved. They always want something to touch. They always want something to fidget with. If you tell them the liquid nitrogen is really cold, minus 321 Fahrenheit, they'll want to touch it anyway. So you have to find ways of like keeping them active and engaged without necessarily, keeping safety precautions. And the more passion that you have and the more that you remember and get back, and this is why I said it was therapeutic, you really get in touch with the reason why you're doing this in the first place. In the technical details, sometimes you miss out on the passion that drives us, and the kids will pick up on that passion, and that's probably one of your most effective tools when teaching. So yeah, these are all wonderful people in the Caltech Traveling Demo Circus doing all sorts of different types of demos. If you're interested, please let me know. We recently got a Moore Hofstadter fund grant for about $1,000 to get a really nice superconducting kit. So very excited. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Sue. I'm a second-year grad student in biology, and today I want to tell you about my experiences first as a student and then as a TA in a hands-on data analysis course. So this course is B by 103, designed and taught by Justin Boyce. It's structured primarily as a flipped classroom format. So the main component of the course is these computational lab sessions on Mondays. Prior to the lab, students will read through tutorials on that week's material and submit an exercise. And then in labs, they'll primarily be working in their homework groups on that week's homework assignment. There's also lecture to cover the key concepts and theory of the course, and office hours to review material, cover supplemental topics of interest, and of course provide help on homework. So the amazing part of this course is its focus on analyzing real data sets. So the vast majority of homework problems take published or data sets collected here at Caltech and ask students to do part of that analysis. So this is an example of a homework from the second problem set of the course involving analyzing sleep in zebrafish. And on the right is an example of a step along the way that students might take for this analysis. So they'll learn to visualize the data, quantify the data, and interpret all of their results in the context of the biological setting. So in this case, the genetics of sleep. So some things I found helpful is because the students are really doing a lot of the sort of hands-on active learning in class, the role of the instructor becomes a little bit more to facilitate that learning. So for this course, that starts with these examples that show how the methods work in practice, enable students to run everything on their own machines and adjust everything and play with it. And then building on that, they can start applying those methods to their homework assignment. And because they're working on these homework assignments in class, they get immediate feedback. They're working with their group members. They can ask, of course, instructors for help. And because you have a little bit more time in class, you don't have to just point out their errors and say, this is what's wrong. You can really help them work through the thought process and probe their thought process and help them reach their misconceptions or fix their problems on their own. And of course, because you as an instructor are getting this feedback as well, you can readily adapt the teaching. For instance, if a lot of students are confused on a certain issue, you can immediately have a short spiel to clear it up. TAs can do a quick review during recitation that week. And so this hands-on process really helps both students and instructors get really prompt feedback to really drive this learning cycle. So what do students feel about it? It's hard, of course. It's a lot of work, but ultimately very valuable. And so this hands-on active learning approach has been a really great way for students to get a much more in-depth understanding of the material and also see the connections to their futures and their careers. Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Tom Miller. I'm a chemistry professor, and I've been teaching along with Sarah Reisman the Chem 1B core class for the last few years. And like many of the different core classes, Chem 1B faces the unusual teaching challenge of simultaneously instructing every single incoming student, irrespective of their eventual interests, at Caltech in one room and at the same time. And that has, over the years, led to a number of challenges and ways to design the course to be as effective to all of those different diverse members of the audience as possible. And what I'd like to focus on, there's various things that we've tried to do in that class to make it better, but one of the things that we've really found was the biggest shakeup was simply revisiting the entire narrative arc of the course and trying to sharpen that and make it as coherent and useful as possible. Chem 1A is a historic course at Caltech, and it's always had a very clear mission, a very clear theme, a very clear set of topics that fall into it. It is essentially Linus Pauling's Nature of the Chemical Bond. You learn about chemical bonding, you learn about how chemical bonding begets molecular structure. Then you get to Chem B, and it's about everything else. It was just this huge laundry list of things that somebody at some time thought everybody ought to know. And it was a real problem. So what we did is we kind of tried to take it back a step and tried to come up with as concise a statement about what Chem 1B should be as we head in hand for Chem 1A. And the decision was that whereas Chem 1A is about how chemicals bond and where they like to be when they are stable, Chem 1B would then be about everything associated with how they move on that energy landscape. And then we had to make decisions. We would ruthlessly cut or streamline topics to be brought in line with that well-defined theme. And we would also take the step of, if it made good sense, we would draw on topics that were perhaps conceived of being slightly too advanced, but we would bring them into the class if it helped us to make a more coherent and a more streamlined narrative, if we could introduce them in a way that was accessible and it was a benefit to the overall storyline of the class. And we arrived at something, a slide that actually I showed probably a half dozen times throughout the course, a sort of Rosetta Stone for what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how it fits into the simplified theme throughout the course. And it basically breaks everything down in terms of how it is a manifestation of molecular motion. The spectroscopy topics are always reminded to be how on that energy landscape you are wiggling and jiggling when you interact with light. The thermodynamics and statistical mechanical concepts are always manifestations of, given enough time, how you are going to statistically visit the different locations on that energy landscape. And then reactivity is simply a manifestation of how you can get from one place to another place on that energy landscape as well. All manifestations of the simple, well-defined theme. And everything can be brought into all the different topics, or the subset that were left in the course could be brought well into these different components of the course. So with that, I think it has led to a number of improvements in the outcomes of the course, and it has led to more of a continuity within the topics of Chem 1B itself. It has led to substantially better continuity in terms of a continuation of the themes of Chem 1A, as well as presenting a continuing theme that would continue into other chemistry classes, like the organic chemistry classes that would subsequently be taken by students. I think as much as anything, it provides a unifying logic for what chemistry is. You know, if you look at all the different websites of chemists on campus, it's astonishing that these people are actually in the same department when you look at what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And to find the simple thing that makes them all chemists and to try to bake that into Chem 1B has been, I think, an advantage of what we're trying to do in that class. And then, of course, it also then shows, by similar logic, the connection between the other physical, biological, and material sciences. So with that, thank you for your attention.
Hi, everybody. Let me see if I can find my pocket. My name is Athena Castro. I am the Executive Director of the Caltech Y. And I'm really pleased to be here to tell you about how we at the Caltech Y approach student programs and perhaps give you some ideas about how you can think about your student interactions outside of the classroom and how that can contribute to student learning. Oops. Here I am. So I titled this talk Thriving Rather Than Surviving because that's a phrase that we hear very often, right? We want our students to thrive and not just survive. And at the Caltech Y, we not only believe that our programs contribute to thriving, but that learning also happens outside of the classroom. But what does that actually mean? What does thriving look like? How do programs outside of the classroom actually contribute to learning? So 4 years ago, we spent a great deal of time really thinking about this. We looked at different models of student engagement, leadership development, and thriving as a concept. According to Schreiner, there are actually 5 factors of thriving. And engaged learning and academic determination constitute the academic domains. Engaged learning is meaningful processing, focused attention, active participation in the learning process, a lot of what we heard about from previous speakers. And academic determination speaks to self-regulated learning, effort, coping skills, and goal-directedness. But there are also these interpersonal and intrapersonal domains that also contribute to thriving. Diverse citizenship is about making a contribution and an appreciation of differences. Social connectedness speaks to positive relationships and access to friendships. And then positive perspective, that optimism and subjective well-being is so important in the student experience. And so based on the various models that we looked at and thriving as a concept, we developed our own model of student outcomes at the Caltech Y. So here's our model, and what we did was we started with the end goal in mind. What do we hope or want students to gain from participation with the Caltech Y? And it not only helped us to articulate our purpose and how we do and why we do what we do, but also helped us to be really intentional about how we go about doing our programs. This model reflects students who are minimally involved, who go to 1, maybe 2 programs, all the way to those students who are most involved, students who serve on committees and take on leadership positions. And the outcomes scaffold, right? They build on each other. Obviously, the students who are most involved are the students who stand to gain the most or benefit. So our model begins with our mission statement in mind. The Caltech Y enriches student life and challenges students to grow into responsible citizens of the world, and that's our foundation for everything. So beginning from the bottom up, and moving up, students who are actively involved with the Caltech Y enrich their lives through fun and positive social interactions beyond the classroom. They make connections, that leads to a support network and friendships and lead to more balanced and healthy lives. They also learn about or gain greater awareness of what's available to them. They discover places for cultural enrichment, learning experiences, service, activism, and leadership, making contributions and responding to community needs. And those students who continue to be involved with the Y also learn or develop and gain their own leadership skills and confidence, the skills that are necessary for interacting and communicating with others, and working independently or in a group in various settings, managing conflict with civility. All of those things and the ability to process, reflect on, and articulate how that experience has impacted learning and their ability. They also gain a greater awareness and appreciation for themselves and the world they live in, an appreciation for cultural and environmental diversity that leads to a bias toward action. It's because we hope that students not only learn to explore and gain an increased awareness of the various community issues, but also an understanding how they can make a difference and address the issues that are of local, national, and or global significance. And finally, developing leadership skills. Students who take leadership roles increase their self-awareness and gain understanding of their own talents, their values, their character and interests as they relate to their capacity to mobilize others. They initiate opportunities to lead and co-lead in different programs and projects, and they demonstrate ethical leadership congruent with their values, character, and personal leadership philosophy. So in sharing how we approach student programs and how we design programs outside of the classroom and these learning experiences, I hope this helps you think outside of the traditional learning models and rethink how you engage your students outside of the classroom that contributes to learning. So I leave you with this thought, is how do you contribute? How do you engage students and contribute outside the classroom and contribute to thriving? Thank you.
Oh, all right, it's magic. Okay, all right, hi. I'm Kitty Cahalan. I work in the CTLO, and I'm speaking on behalf of a member of one of our programs in CTLO. I'm talking about one of the programs that we run. We have a lot of things that we do in the outreach office in CTLO, where I am the coordinator of outreach programs. Arian's works very closely with us and does an amazing job of connecting with many students and getting all kinds of people excited about science when he meets them at different events. And then we have another program where we have students from Caltech, students and postdocs, who are working consistently with the school every week over multiple years and developing those deep relationships and covering many science topics. So I'm going to talk about that program today, which we call the Visiting Scientists at Caltech. And we were working, our partnership is with Cleveland Elementary, which is a Pasadena Unified School District school in the northwest of Pasadena near the Rose Bowl. We're in our second year of the program, and the scientists, our group, meet weekly with the students and teach lessons to every student at the school gets a lesson every week. And then we also meet weekly to plan our lessons. Our group is made up of 2 postdocs and 1 former postdoc who's a community member and 5 graduate students, and they're divided up into 2 teams, one that teaches the kinder through 2nd grade and one that teaches the 3rd through 5th grades. Just to understand a little bit about Cleveland, it has about 150 general ed students, so it works out to about 1 class per grade, which is why we can do all the classes in a single day. And it is about 98% Black or Latino, and 90% of the students are low socioeconomic status as defined by participating in free and reduced lunch program. And you can see some pictures up there. This is Cecilia, is one of our grad students teaching a lesson about waves using her bass guitar. So, talk about, like Arian says, connecting the kids with something that they know and connecting it to a science concept. Down here we brought some chemistry lab equipment, and our grad student Kyle was showing off. We were doing a distillation project, and we were trying to understand the difference between chemical and physical changes. And so we brought some lab equipment so they could connect with what scientists are actually using. So some of our program features, we started this year designing pre and post tests so that we could assess if the learning, if they were actually getting the concepts that we were trying to convey. That's been a little bit of a process. None of us are teachers. So we're trying to figure out the best way to ask the questions and what do we assess. So this is a pre and a post test from a thing about physical changes versus chemical changes. And we think they got it, except that next time around we would change the way we ask the question. Maybe give some examples. So it's been a bit of a learning curve. We also place an emphasis on scientific expression and vocabulary, so we're trying to teach them how to speak like scientists. And then just by hands-on activities that are within a group, they're getting familiarity with scientific method, which is something that a lot of elementary students don't get just because many teachers are sort of afraid to do science, so they tend to do it through informational text only. There aren't a lot of teachers who are just willing to jump in. We also collaborate with the Cleveland faculty, and we try to do our activities based on next-gen science standards and within the Pasadena Unified Scope and Sequence, so that they're sort of getting it in the order that they would be doing if their teacher was doing it. The benefits to our team is that they're learning to teach. They're gaining classroom management skills that are very different than when they're TAing at Caltech, because a 3rd grader and a Caltech student are similar in some ways, but not in 100% of the ways. They're all very curious, it's all good stuff. Value of active learning, so they're really seeing in firsthand how great it is to do hands-on learning and how much the kids connect with the lessons. The pre and post test design, as I say, and distilling the complicated concepts into ways that children can understand. So we use a lot of games. We have drawing and creative writing as part of it, and that has really helped the kids own what they're doing. So finally, we have the benefits for Cleveland students. So these students get weekly exposure to research scientists, which is not something that a lot of kids in schools can say. And they developed relationships with them. And we hope that will prepare them better for middle school and give them the exposure to the breadth of scientific inquiry out there. That's it.
Okay, so the research tells us that when we get new information, that it just sort of dangles in our mind. Those new concepts dangle in our mind if we are not able to tie it into our prior knowledge, our previous experiences, things that we've already know or done. So I might ask you to do something right now that's going to help you reflect and make an action plan and think about how what you've just learned relates to previous knowledge, previous experiences. I'd like someone to volunteer an idea of what I might ask you to do in terms of an active learning activity, and I'm really looking at people who've taken my class before for some of these suggestions, and I will stare you down because I know who you are. Ideas? Think, pair, share. Thank you so much, Olivia. So, right now, what I'd like you to do, and if you haven't been exposed to it before, think, pair, share is exactly that, where you think and reflect on what you've just experienced and learned about right now, and then you take a minute to share with the people around you, and then we share back out. So, please take a few minutes, share with your partner, and talk about what are your takeaway messages from today? Is there something that you learned about that was new, or do you have that aha moment of something you're going to implement in your class or in your course or outside of the classroom as we learned about? I'll give you 2 minutes, I'll show some signs, and then I'd like to share back out. So please meet some people in the room. Okay, I'd like to bring you back together. All right, and for those of you who are scared about using active learning in big classrooms, that's a nice demonstration of how in 5 seconds you can get the class back together, but you can sort of set them free and then get them back. So it's now your turn. Can I have some ideas of what you were talking about in your partners? What are your takeaway messages, or what do you want to try and implement in your classroom or outside the classroom? Ideas. Yes. Thank you.
I thought that's something that we always try to do, but we can always do better. To wire all those pieces in the course and how they all fit together.
Perfect. So thinking about the bigger curriculum, making those connections, how do things fit together? Perfect. What else? Thank you. Yeah, Cora.
I liked hearing about Arian talking about ways to not use jargon and outreach, like saying spinning things stay spinning instead of talking about angular momentum, because I think that's a huge challenge and something you have to think about before you go and do outreach.
Perfect. Knowing your audience. Who are you talking to? And if you're going to say angular momentum to 6-year-olds, are they really going to stick with you, or do you need to call it something else? And then as Arian said, he still uses that terminology and just sort of throws it out there so they hear those words, but he's really trying to get that message across, and the message across is that spinning things stay spinning. Thanks, Cora. Can I have maybe 2 more ideas? What else are you talking about? Yeah, Becca. Perfect. So the idea of knowing where you're going. And there's been a lot of research on that says when students know like what they're using those courses for and where they're going to be using them again, how they're going to be applying them, how it's useful for them, that they're much more motivated and engaged and excited to do those things. Even if it's slogging through something right now, they know they're going to be applying it or using it in the future for something that might be a bit more exciting. One more idea. You guys know I don't mind awkward silence, so I'm just gonna stand here and wait. Yeah.
I really like the phrase ruthlessly cut streamlining topics.
Perfect. So that idea of when we're all teaching, and I say in my class often, we want to tell them all the things, and we can't tell them all the things. We need to think about what content we want to include and what content we might need to ruthlessly cut, to quote Tom, from our teaching as well, because we can't teach all the things. What do we want to focus on? Building ourselves, those parameters, what are our learning goals and our outcomes? So I want to end with this. We've still got some talks and seminars later this week, so please check them out if you haven't already. And if you could join me, thank you for your participation today, and thank you very much to those who shared out. And if we can join me in thanking all of our speakers.